episode will mark the 15th episode of the Garud podcast, and I hope all of you have been enjoying the episode so far. I hope all of you are currently enjoying your summer break, and this month marks the month of July, and the summer holidays have, I guess, just begun for our viewers in the United States and Canada. And in this episode, I got a chance to have a conversation with the CEO of a drone company. My next guest here is Mr. Ryan Walsh, who is the CEO of Valqari. However, Mr. Walsh has a very interesting background. Just like in the 14th episode of this podcast, I got a chance to have a conversation with a special operator who had served in the Navy SEALs. In this episode, my guest here, Mr. Ryan Walsh, also served in the Special Forces. However, he served in the 75th Ranger Regiment instead of the Navy SEALs. The 75th Ranger Regiment have also conducted a multitude of difficult operations, and much of their work is also clandestine in nature, just as the Navy SEALs. And in this episode, we got a chance to talk about Mr. Walsh's time in the Ranger Regiment, how he became a Ranger, some of the experiences he had while undergoing the training needed to become a Ranger, how his time in the military changed his life, and also an important question was answered as to why almost each and every single special operator, once they retire, why is it the case that the majority of them start their own companies? What enables a special operator to successfully start their own companies once they retire from the armed forces? Next, we also spoke about the work being done at Valqari, the drone stations being built, the culture and the ethos of the company, and the overall mission of the company. Once again, if any of you have some feedback or comments, please do let me know in the comment section below. Just to start off this podcast, I'll be playing a short clip after this about the 75th Ranger Regiment, and I hope all of you enjoy this next episode of the podcast. And most importantly, please do subscribe to this podcast, as it'll enable me to invite more and more guests on the show. This episode will also mark the second episode in which a special operator has been able to come on the show. In fact, I never even imagined it. I never even thought it would be possible for me to invite and even get a chance to talk to a Special Forces soldier. Special Forces soldiers, especially in the United States, have the same stature and status as a celebrity. And for me to be able to have a conversation for almost an hour, more than an hour, with a Navy SEAL and now a Ranger is just mind-boggling. It's just mind-boggling to me. And more and more episodes of the podcast are yet to come, and stay tuned for more updates. Thank you.
And for those that are remaining, They have one final task. If they complete it, they pass on to Phase 2.
Phase 2 is the second phase of RASP 1, where after we've tested their physical assessment in Phase 1, we now start to introduce them to different skills and really start to test their mental capabilities. The first thing that they're introduced to in Phase 2 is a marksmanship program. For a lot of these candidates, it's the first time they've ever held a pistol, so we really hone in on their pistol skills, as well as touch on basic rifle marksmanship and even more advanced techniques that they're going to need to know to become a ranger. Also in Phase 2, we introduce them to a couple of skills that increases their lethality as well as mobility on the battlefield. And lastly, before graduation, we bring them into the shoot house. The shoot house is a culminating event between Phase 1 and Phase 2, specifically in the combatives program. But not only are we testing their combatives capabilities, we also want to see the room clearing capabilities, the weapons manipulations, and to see if they have the aggression that it takes to become a ranger.
So you're kind of like the second person. I mean, you're from. I mean, you're a drone CEO. But I think you're kind of like the second person who is also had a background in the armed forces. So the previous episode was with the Navy SEAL, and so you were with the Rangers. So yeah,
Yep.
it's been and so welcome to the show, Mr. Walsh. I'm really happy to have you on. So your journey in the business world, particularly with the drone industry, has been very impressive. And so Mr. Walsh received the title of Chicago Dealmaker of the Year. And additionally, you've channeled your passion into building Valqari, which is at the forefront of creating and developing drone delivery infrastructure. And Mr. Walsh has had a bachelor's degree in economics and an MBA. And additionally, Mr. Walsh also served in the 75th Rangers Regiment, which is a special forces unit of the U.S. Army. So thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Walsh, and really happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I always just like to ask everyone who comes on the show, like, what motivated you just to start Valkyrie, and what attracted you to the unmanned aerial vehicle industry in the first place?
You know, it was 11 or so years ago when I first started getting into the drone space, and my partner at the time, we had a couple of successes in small businesses that we had done, and we were looking for something a little bit more challenging. And at the time, it was really the forefront and the bleeding edge of drones. And so we saw a huge opportunity to find our next challenge, so to speak. And so we started looking at drones and realized that while drones were the forefront, they weren't necessarily new, quote unquote, right? It's something that's been around for a long time. Actually, Nikola Tesla filed the first remote control drone patent back in 1898 for a little remote control boat, and he used to trick people at the fair with it. Um, and so we realized that the opportunity wasn't in the drones themselves, but it was in the support and in the infrastructure and the things that would be needed to bring drones into the mainstream. And so that's where we found our value proposition, which was all of the landing infrastructure that's required for drones. And we founded Valqari on that.
Mhm. And just out of curiosity, like when you were in the Rangers, 75th Rangers Regiment, did you use drones at all? Like, is that kind of where you got exposed to them a little bit more, or was that not the case?
No, it's a great question. I was back in the Army in 2004 to 2008 timeframe, and that was really when drones were first entering the battlefield. When I was first deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq, that was when we were seeing early editions of like the Predator drone and then the Reaper drone, and just the evolution that was made in some of those air assets just over the course of my deployments was revolutionary in my mind. So when time circled back to that, there was no question in my mind that drones were going to be an inevitability. It just seemed so obvious to me after seeing what their capabilities were in the military and knowing that, it's always about 20 years ahead. And you're going to have your ISR and your camera feeds, and then you have your bomb platforms, and now eventually all the way to logistics. So it was just a linear transition in my mind.
Mhm. And like what was the process like just towards starting Valkyrie, like in terms of maybe like getting the permits, the workspace, the engineers, etc.
That actually came quite a bit after. So in 2013, when we kind of first had the idea, um, we knew it was hardware based, and so we had to file patents. And so we really worked for probably all of Q4 and part of Q3, just nonstop of 2013, and just typed away and researched. And we got to a point where we got our patents filed New Year's Eve of 2013, and then you wait for years. You're sitting for maybe 3 years in a lot of cases, just waiting, and you have to spend money that whole time, and you've got to, make decisions and spend a lot of money on which countries you're going into, and you don't even know if you've got a granted patent yet. And so those 3 years after that were nerve-wracking. It was a very, very challenging time. But we found out in 2017 that we did get our patents, and we were the first to file in our technologies. And so our lawyer had called us up and said, "Hey, you got Canada, and you got Europe, and you got China, and then you got the U.S." And so we realized we had something. And so 2017, we started forming Valkyrie, and at that point, it was almost 4 years later. So it was quite a challenge just getting to that point, let alone going out and finding the right people and finding a space and designing prototypes and all of that. So just getting to that point was difficult in itself.
Mhm. And I have just sort of noticed that I mean, I'm sure it is popular in other branches of the military, but especially, almost every single special operator, once they retire, they do start their own companies. And it's because like I mean, I've watched many podcasts with other special operators, and pretty much every single person has a company of their own, just like yourself. Like, um, do you think like what is it maybe just about like being the special operator which maybe gives you guys an extra edge to, just go and start your own companies?
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of what they teach you is the drive and the discipline, and when things are challenging, to still make sure you're doing the right thing day in and day out. And most importantly, to be able to do it with initiative. And if you're out and, with your team, you got to be counted on to do the right thing under all circumstances, even when it's hard. And so I think there's a lot of just natural soft skills and natural leadership ability that comes through when you're getting chosen for special operations. They definitely pick a specific kind of person. Um, and so I think that those are the same people that have a natural proclivity to solve problems, which usually is what starting a company involves, right? You find a problem and you solve it. But more importantly, it's about making sure you have something sustainable, making sure you do the right things each and every day, and so you build on yesterday's successes. It's just a lot of the core just personality traits of special operators that tend to lend themselves well to entrepreneurship, because that same uncertainty, that same lack of resources, that same just not having a playbook or not having an answer to what you need to solve is really what special operations is about. And so entrepreneurship and special operations tend to be pretty synonymous in a lot of ways, minus the combat.
Yeah, correct. Um, so like I already said, so you were part of the 75th Rangers Regiment, and the selection process is notoriously difficult, and mental fortitude is obviously a very important strength that you need to have. Like for you specifically, like what was the selection process like, and what just kind of surprised you as you were going through it?
Yeah, I mean, to share what I can about it, it's a challenge, right? And they'll do everything in their power to weed out the people that are there for the wrong reasons or don't want to be there. If you join a unit like that to get glory or to get, notoriety, you're in it for the wrong reasons. There's if you're doing it right, there should be very little of that. Um, Other people join because they think it's cool or this, but you have to have something just deeply inside of you that's forcing you to be there, to where quitting is almost um a pain you can't really manage. Because the guys that made it through were the guys that literally just said, I can't quit, I won't quit, it's not even on the table. And a lot of the times you hear about successful entrepreneurs, the CEO of NVIDIA. I saw an interview with him recently, and he said grit is the most important thing. Um, and when you're getting through special operations selections, or whether you're going through, the journey of building your own company, it's the same thing. You're getting these external forces that are making life extremely challenging, and you have to find a way not only to motivate yourself, but the people around you to complete the mission.
Mhm. And um, I've just noticed, like, amongst special operations forces, like in the US, like the most popular unit is the SEALs, just like because of the movies and social media. But you do have like the Delta Force, you have the 75th Ranger Regiment, and I just sometimes feel like, especially the 75th Rangers and the Delta are more secretive just because, like the public don't really talk about them. So, um, you know, based on your time, how would you say like the public's perception of you guys is like a little bit different as compared to other special operations units?
I don't know that I would make an assessment on the public perception. I don't know if I'm qualified to do that. I will say that, the units you're mentioning that tend to be a little bit more secretive and take their operational security a little seriously, or a bit more seriously. There's a reason for it, and it's important to their mission. And so, again, the special operations soldiers that are doing it right, you tend not to hear about, you tend not to know about what they're up to or their missions, and that's how it should be. If you hear about something that the 75th has done, it's usually part of a much bigger thing. Otherwise, they're not talking about it. And so, I think that's with good reason, and that's built into the mission set that they have.
Mhm. Okay. And so just like you said, like most of what the 75th does is classified in nature. But is there like did you just the degree to which you can talk about, did you like see any emerging technologies in into ranger training, or like the missions you used, and how did they just change your life as a ranger?
We definitely, as special operations, always had kind of the best gear you can imagine, right? And always the cutting edge. And so um, it was very, very you felt very protected when you had guys like that and the top technology around you at all times. I mean, there really wasn't a situation we didn't have a solution to, and that was always reassuring for me. It definitely made me feel safer in that environment. In particular, knowing that we always had the best gear, the best weapons, the best everything. Um, Now, with that, there's also going back to the last comment, right? There's a level of operational security that goes with adopting and incorporating new technologies because those are usually your edge on the battlefield. And so, not necessarily talking about those was one of the keys to our success. And so, a lot of the times you're dealing with stuff or incorporating or working with a technology that may not be publicly known sometimes, and so there's challenges just alone in that. But overall, it was always, uh, again, very reassuring to be on the right side of kind of that technological disparity on the battlefield. And so for me, the units I was with, having that access was just phenomenal.
Mhm. And um, like, is it? Could you just maybe talk about like just a brief little example where like you or some of your other colleagues like took initiative and leadership beyond like what was expected? Like, what kind of influenced the outcome of the decision? Like, what was the thought process? Vaguely, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that happened often. I remember one leader I had on my last tour. He was our commanding officer, and we got into an objective, and it just wasn't what we were told. The intel was wrong, or we were in the wrong building, or something. But something didn't line up, and we had to make some very on the spot decisions. And if we chose wrong, if he chose wrong, it would have led to people getting seriously hurt, both us and civilians. But luckily, he assessed the battlefield, he assessed the situation, and made the right call. And we ended up getting to the objective where we needed to be, and getting that person. And so, uh, a lot of that stress coming at you from all angles, right? Bullets are flying at you, people are screaming, explosions, things like that. It makes it very chaotic. And if anything, it's the worst possible environment to make a decision in, let alone a quick snap decision. So having that training, having all of that knowledge and knowing the capabilities of everybody around you and the technological assets around you, um, and making those snap decisions based on all known factors, and still trying to get that best possible outcome, and seeing that happen over and over again. um, it really just showed the right example. It showed how you need to be, and the ways you need to think in order to be set up for that success. And so just having those examples over and over again, because that was one of the beautiful things about the 75th, is you don't really have any um, sandbaggers or spotlighters, we call them, right? Guys that don't carry their weight, or guys that are only doing it for the attention. You just don't see a lot of that. Those guys get worked out pretty quick. And so um, just knowing those people were able to make those decisions, it empowered you to be the best possible leader and the best, decision maker you could be also. So it was this self-reinforcing policy in a lot of ways.
And I think you like answered this already that special operations sort of equates to entrepreneurship due to like the similarities in the job. But is there any particular skill you kind of honed being a ranger, like, and like what you found, like what was the most used skill like towards building Valkyrie? Like, how do you think that kind of helped you?
I go back to one of my patrols in Derby phase of Ranger School, right? And in Derby phase, it's the first phase of three in Ranger School, and you probably haven't slept in a few days, and probably have only eaten a meal or two in the last couple days, and a lot of the guys in your squad at that point are already worn down. They're tired. They're covered in insect bites. It's a bad time. And all of a sudden you get your frago uh, from the RI, the instructor, and here's your mission. You need to walk 5 miles and take out this objective. And you've got to get all these guys around you that haven't slept, that haven't ate, that are tired, that realistically just want to go and call their girlfriend or whatever. And you got to get them to go walk through a swamp for 5 miles and then go hit an objective. And there's nothing for them after that. It's you're gonna maybe get an hour of sleep and do it again. And so finding that motivation in yourself and within them, knowing how to balance the carrot and the stick of incentivizing that, and knowing that tomorrow they're going to be on a patrol and they're going to count on you. And if you're not leading them properly or you're not being a good follower, that stuff comes around very quickly. So you learn how to kind of grind your way through some of those really, really tough situations. And I think that is by far the most important skill, is that mental toughness and that fortitude. There's got to be 100, maybe 1,000 decisions, or situations over the course of the last 11 years with Valqari where had I not built that resiliency in, it would have been easier to quit. And I'm glad that I didn't each and every one of those times, but there's plenty of opportunities that present you with that temptation.
Okay. And um, one kind of just like thought occurred to me is like this is just my interpretation, but like the training can like you go to Rangers, like, I'm just assuming you go to Ranger school and they train you, but um the training, in my opinion, maybe can just only like get you so far, right? Because like I mean, the world of warfare is constantly changing. So uh is is there like any like what do Rangers like kind of do to like make sure that they're up to speed with whatever's going on in the world of warfare? Uh,
They are some of the most tapped in people when it comes to new advances in technology and techniques. It's kind of part of their doctrine is to always stay at the cutting edge of that. And I think a program that was recently talked about was if a ranger gets shot, they'll actually have a guy on the battlefield or multiple guys on the battlefield with blood that has been tested, and these guys are clean, and they'll literally just plug an IV from you right into your hurt buddy.
mhm.
And so staying on those things, a lot of the gunshot trauma that we're learning over the last 20 years how to treat them has been learned by the ranger medics, just because they've dealt with so much of it. um, it's really incredible to see how much just overall their forward thinking has led to breakthroughs in so many different areas. um, so I would say that just overall being aware of your surroundings and aware of the market, the environment you're in, the just the overall everything. Um, in the military, we call it METTC, right? You have to know everything about the mission and the terrain and the conditions and all these different dispositions that are going to impact your mission, and your mission choices are going to be determined by a lot of that. There isn't always a one size fits all, especially in entrepreneurship. So, in that regard, I think there's a lot of similarities.
Okay. And so I just want to talk about Valkyrie a little bit now. So just like the first question I just had about Valkyrie was that so uh, I believe like you're trying to target like drone delivery for like residential areas and public spaces as well. And like one concern with drones, which everybody just has, is like just like security in terms of making sure that the drones are secure. And so, like, how does like some of Valkyrie's technology like address these concerns? And like, how can you like just prevent tampering or like incorporate user authentication?
No, it's great questions. And because, our team is so heavy with special operations and former Rangers, security is baked into pretty much everything we do. It's something we take very seriously, both the security and safety of our team, our customers, our partners. And so, all through and not just from a technological perspective but from a process perspective, right? Setting yourself up for success in a lot of ways, and you do that just through sequencing and processing, right? So when does the customer interact with the landing station? Does the customer ever interact with the drone directly, right? Things like that we've worked through, on top of just the protocols and the encryption and the cybersecurity and all the different things that we've worked in at different layers, to ensure that security and safety. And so it's kind of something that's got to be built in the requirements and in the framework from day one. It's very challenging to go back through and then secure something. It's so much easier to build it secure.
And so as like drone use expands, I would say like airspace management also becomes quite crucial. So like in the future, I think they're going to be using like UTM systems and so forth. So like how is like Valkyrie software like kind of designed to make sure that it's integrated with like UTM systems, or just to make sure that drone traffic flow is smooth in any neighborhood?
Great question. So the landing station over my shoulder, if you can see it, for the listeners, every one of those is built to be entirely modular, and agnostic, right? So we can work with virtually any drone. Our software that does all of the communication and authentication between the drone and the landing station, can be fit on most drones. But the idea being that when that drone lands, before it takes back off again, part of our sequence is it checks with the UTM and it has to get approval for that flight. And we do that through a number of our partners, right? We have One Sky and Air Matrix and others. But having the capability to check again that everything's safe and secure, right? Knowing that the drone is going to take off with that package or take off and return to base. And it's not going to have an obstacle. It's not going to have a conflict or a collision, is incredibly necessary for the safety of our cargo, our drones, our patients that we're working with, and in medical cases, but also the public, on the ground, which is what the FAA is really most concerned with. And so, making sure that we're incorporating all the various technologies that are adding to those layer of safeties, like UTM. Another one is a partner of ours, Resilience. They have a really great product called Framework that lets you know the status and the health of the drones at all times. Different things like that give the pilot and the systems operators more situational awareness and understanding of the flight, and all of that is really critical to keep that safety and security, right? And so not just the UTM, but all of the different layers that are kind of being incorporated into mainstream drone adoption is what we're prioritizing working with.
Mhm. And one thing I was just kind of like reading about is so drone deliveries obviously have the potential to reduce traffic congestion and emissions, because there are less cars on the road. So uh, also like so just out of curiosity, like how's like Valkyrie trying to ensure like drone delivery stations are like energy efficient, like they contribute to like a more sustainable delivery model?
It's also a wonderful question. So our newer models that we're working on, are designed with solar. We have tested with solar already, and it's very, very efficient in the markets we were using it. So we're big fans. Our box doesn't use enough power ongoing, right? It tends to really kind of use spurts of power as the drones are coming in and out. And so there's time for that solar cell to, charge a battery, right? It's not continuously draining at all times. And so it's actually a perfectly suited design for remote type operations with solar capabilities. Or we recently had a patent granted that covers a lot of those things, where you're getting solar charging, you're charging the drone when it lands, and then putting that power back into the drone network or back into the grid so we could create these little smart grid networks using our landing stations. So we see a lot of opportunities. And when you do start using solar and charging the drone, it becomes an entirely green ecosystem. So these drones are entirely clean tech once we've incorporated that at scale. And so I think that the renewable power is going to be one of the keys because much like our last mile logistics network, our energy networks have the same kind of limitations. We're kind of up against the wall in a lot of cases. And I was just reading about how AI is putting further stress on our power grids that we really can't sustain right now. And so you think about COVID or the holidays or things when traffic congestion is the worst and packages take forever. If we can alleviate a little bit of that off the road with drones, that is more efficiency for people that are getting places and not, moving Uber Eats or DoorDash or whatever, right? Like having an entire car deliver a small hamburger is extremely inefficient. So it's really about removing some of those inefficiencies more than anything.
Okay. And I mean, drones are not just like I mean, they're used for delivery, but people are just trying to use them for like delivering blood or delivering organs as well in like certain remote areas, especially in Africa, and just to get quick medical supplies as well. So, like, have you or like Valkyrie explored that space a little bit just for like maybe emergency use and so forth? Or?
Yeah, emergency deliveries and medical and healthcare deliveries are a prime focus for us. One of our core missions when we started the company was to increase access to medical care and do so more cost effectively, and also to close food deserts. Right? I have the tendency to be lazy at times. I hate running errands. I absolutely hate it. It's probably one of the things I despise more than anything else, having to waste a Saturday and have to go from store to store to store getting what you need. It's the worst. And so, to me, if I can have a drone come and bring what I need and I can get my Saturday back, I mean, I have a pretty busy schedule, right? And so that time is valuable to me. If I could get 4 or 6 hours back on a Saturday, that's worth its weight in gold to me, right? And so being able to get a technology that we can use for convenience is great, but it's really more important that we can use it to save lives, to increase people's standard of living, and people that might normally not have access to like in-home medical care, right? We can now get them what they need and at a price point they can afford, and hopefully extend lives and have better patient outcomes. And so to us, the medical field is probably one of the most burgeoning in this space.
And so like right now, like this is just an assumption I'm making, but I think Valkyrie's focus at the moment is maybe like around residential deliveries. But do you have does a company like have plans to like handle like much larger deliveries or deliveries to like maybe major commercial locations in the future?
Yeah, we're actually focused quite heavily on healthcare and B2B and government type operations right now. That's where most of our efforts are going to. We always like to maintain the vision of where this is going, which is, eventually you will have deliveries to and from your house, routinely. I think we're still maybe a year or two away from that starting to roll out in mass, especially with the new FAA Reauthorization Act and the timeline they've laid out. I think we're very, very close, and we should see a lot of movement between now and the end of 2025. But as of today, residential models just aren't. There's just not the demand, right? It's much more so on the medical and some of the commercial and enterprise side, which is where we're putting our efforts, because a lot of those lessons learned translate very well to the home, but also we're building the hubs of those networks, right? So if you think you set up a network for a hospital, for instance, as you're connecting other properties to that hospital, eventually you would have people getting deliveries at their home, and it wouldn't be a large jump at all to go from hospital to door and creating a doctor to door care, right? And that's one of the many initiatives we're focused on right now in that process. So at some point in the very near future, I see us having a lot more interaction with people at the home level. But for right now, we're still focused very much on our core, which is getting those hubs and key areas like medical.
Yeah. And so like we've talked a lot about medical, but it's so like I'm sure like drones could deliver like medical supplies and like disaster zones very quickly. So like especially in like an emergency response situations, like drones could be extremely useful. So like how could you like maybe integrate drones into like existing emergency networks in case there's like a major hurricane or storm or something like that?
Brilliant question. My colleague, Sean Jenkins, is actually focused very heavily on that use case. Um, I see exactly what you're seeing, right? It's um, oftentimes when you have these natural disasters or you have these situations that are so precarious, um, you'll have infrastructure washed out. You won't have the capabilities or the resources to distribute goods. Oftentimes, you'll have, just all kinds of mass casualty type stuff where just everything is currently locked down. And so, if we were able to position these landing stations at strategic points around, key locations that are more prone to that, we would be able to distribute network. Medicine and key critical supplies and do what we need to do to keep those people safe and secure through that time until first responders and people are able to mitigate or get the infrastructure back up. Another one we're testing actually is wildfire response. So if you have a drone pre-stationed on there with different fire extinguishing grenades or different liquids, whatever, um, we're working on loading the drone, and then it's dispatched to the fire, drops the payload, comes back, has another one loaded on, goes back, comes back, charges, another one loaded on, right? And so using our landing stations as almost remote wildfire response stations and emergency response stations, being able to provide support equipment and different key tools to first responders. So that's something we're very much diving into. It still runs into the same problems with the FAA. And so I think that market is going to explode kind of alongside the drone delivery market, to be honest.
Yeah. And so like just like when we were talking about the Rangers, like you just mentioned that like Ranger medics have seen seen a lot already. And I do think like drones can be used quite a bit in the military. I mean, they're already being used in the military, but like used towards like maybe helping wounded soldiers because at the moment soldiers are simply medevaced from the location back to the base or wherever the hospital is. So like, have you or anybody else at Valkyrie just considered like how you can use to provide battlefield medical assistance like to somebody who's wounded?
Absolutely. So we have several partnerships. I'm going to call one out right now with our partner Bloodstone down in Tampa. They make incredibly amazing packaging, right? So uh, some of our containers we get through them. And they're able to hold temperature within 1 degree for anywhere from 24 to 72 hours, depending on how much of their technology you have in there. And so using that to keep blood at temperature for medical deliveries, for military, things like that has been part of our development. And while we're implementing it for hospitals currently, we are very much looking at implementing it with the military with some of the current projects we're on. And so you hit the nail on the head, whether it's Kazabac, right? And you have guys on the front of the battlefield that need to be pulled back. Or, one of the big things we had was if you're in an extended firefight, you need to get a speedball dropped in, which is, like a bag or a box, full of ammo and water and food and bullets, right? And so being able to have a drone drop a speedball into the middle of a fight, that would be amazing. Um, those are the types of actions we're seeing that could really change the battlefield, right? So when I was in Predator, Reaper drones, the big drones, right? that was all you saw, right? And then, maybe about 10 years ago in Syria and Yemen, they started seeing the smaller drones, right? ISIS was kind of one of the early adopters of that technique, but Ukraine really changed the game. When you have these 15-year-old kids with a $500 drone taking out a multi-billion-dollar tank, that's never been done in warfare when you look at asymmetric warfare at that odd. So all of a sudden, all of the big planners, the generals, they're going, whoa, there's something here. And the same way they can carry those bombs, to drop on the enemy, they can carry aid, they can carry first response type equipment. And so we're looking at this, how do we keep the same core mission of bettering people's lives, but also extending that to the military and our soldiers, right? How do we better our armed forces lives? So we want to make sure that this technology is being used in the best ways we can control, right? But we can't always control everybody's use or disposition. And so, to some extent, we have to adopt to those curves too.
Yeah. And like one thing, I mean, I just noticed is like, I mean, drones can do a lot of good. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But at the same time, like they do pose like a few security threats, and sometimes like they can be like subject to like being controlled by some other external negative force. So like what sort of like maybe countermeasures are there to prevent like like the incorrect use of drones, or like prevent malicious drone activity, or like just prevent somebody else who's not supposed to have control of them like having control of them?
No, it's a huge concern. In my opinion, I think it's one of the biggest existential threats we have as a civilian society, to be honest with you. Um, they're so readily available, and there's so many ways to weaponize a drone. It's I don't think it's a threat that's being taken seriously enough. Um, a bad actor with the right training and technology could do some serious harm. And I think that's always a risk. And we're seeing a cat and mouse game, and we're going to keep seeing it. For quite some time in the drone space. You have, and we call it more partners of ours. A company called DroneSec, right? A guy Mike Monick, he's doing incredible things in the cybersecurity, which is part prevention and then part, um, reaction and some of those. Um, and so, from the cyber threat, right? Because the worst thing would be somebody hacking, taking control of, an asset or something with, capabilities you don't want bad actors to have. So that's always a concern from the cyber point of view. Now, from the actual physical taking the drones down, I mean, you're seeing another arms race developed, right? So you have everything from physical countermeasures where you're shooting nets, and you have anti-drone drones where you have one drone take out another drone. I think Anduril just released something like that. Um, and then you also have electronic, right? So everything from, the actual signal controlling the drone all the way to its own electromagnetic frequencies. All types of ways to try and manipulate that to take that drone out of the air, or at least take control of the drone. And some, give it a nice gentle landing and have the drone set down. Others just pull it right out of the air. And each one's got its own safety factors along with it. But as long as there's drones, there's going to be counter drone measures that are going to be just as important, because whether it's a government facility, a nuclear site, a civilian gathering, whatever it may be, there's going to be threats of opportunity. And when you add in this third dimension that most people haven't necessarily had access to readily available. And so now if you have a bad actor for a few $1,000s and some, homemade chemicals, and you can make life very tough for a lot of people, you've got to have those kind of robust countermeasures. It's just the nature of it, right? It's like the internet or guns or anything else. They're not inherently good or evil, but they are tools to implement good or evil.
Mhm. So I just have like two final questions.
Yeah.
So with the rise of like drones and UAVs, like how do you see like the role of fighter pilots or pilots changing? Like especially there was I think there's a video dropped a while ago where the Air Force USAF was able to remotely pilot the F-16, I think, and that got a lot of attention. So, and I mean, everything, much of what USAF does is classified, but even with the F-35, they have said that there's like an external drone which is connected to the F-35. Like, how do you see like the role of fighter pilots changing now as more of these technologies are coming in?
I think it's going to mirror a lot of what we're seeing in other areas, right? So, even 5 years ago, we would hire pilots, right? And the pilots were manually flying the drones, and we were doing our testing and our customer stuff, and every flight was manual, and it let a lot of room for error. A lot of human error was chalked up to some of the different failures that we had over that time. Um, but I think like anything else, now we're hiring systems operators, right, or systems managers, right? Because when you're running a drone network, or you just even a point-to-point network, you're not flying anything anymore, right? The drone is handling most of that heavy lifting. What the pilot, so to speak, quote unquote, is doing, right? And I almost think pilots is somewhat becoming an archaic term on the civilian side because while the FAA, you need to be a Part 107 pilot, and yes, to step in and take control of the drone in a situation or an emergency, yes, you want to have somebody with clear, solid piloting skills, but 99% of the time, all the routine stuff, it's just going through a mission, right? And so you're staring at that screen and you're determining, is everything good, everything nominal, nothing's looking catastrophic, right? There's no safety or security issues, but you're overviewing that and kind of monitoring it for any kind of anomalous behavior, right? And not so much controlling it. And so I think going back to fighter pilots, we're going to see a shift. I think they're going to be probably one of the last to fully automate, because if you've ever seen those fighter pilots in action, they are incredible. I would say that I would be hard pressed to see AI in the short term make the kind of snap decisions and based on the quality experience that they have, right? I would say that automating a civilian flight is like when AI beat humans in chess. But automating a fighter pilot is like trying to beat them in Go. It's going to take a few more years. Um, and so I think that while fighter pilots will eventually, become a little bit more phased out and somewhat I don't want to say antiquated, but not needed in the same numbers. Um, I think that it's just going to be part of the natural progression of this technology being adopted.
So my last question just for you is like, what kind of advice would you want to give to someone who wants to join the special forces or even start their own drone company?
Man, know what you're getting into, or maybe don't. That's how you get through it, is not knowing what's in front of you. But um, the more you can learn. I go back to a lesson I had learned in Afghanistan, and um, we were in a firefight, and we were getting shot at, and that same commander I mentioned before, he knew something wasn't right. This wasn't like a firefight we had been in before. Just it was different. The timing of the shots was different. Just the way they were reacting was different. And he just kind of said, "Time out, pause." Um, and we got an interpreter and we started yelling back and forth to the guys in there, and it turns out it was this kid. It was a kid, couldn't have been more than 14 years old, and all the males in his village had been killed. And at 14, he was the oldest male left in the valley, and so he had to wake up every night and defend his family and his neighbors. And sometimes it was just a pack of jackals, and sometimes it was, bad people. So every night he stood guard, and all he wanted to do was go to school. And I'm sitting there going, I had the chance to go to college, and all I'm wanting to do is come here and fight a war that for what, right? Why am I in this kid's backyard fighting him for no reason? I don't have a reason to be in this kid's backyard. And so that was when it kind of clicked for me that I had to turn my life around a little bit and get my priorities straight. And that's when I really, for the first time in my life, prioritized education. And I realized that that knowledge and that learnings that I was doing, that experience, that was my ammo. That was my tool. And so being able to kind of learn that for what it was, it kind of hit me like a sack of bricks. I had gotten out and sort of started going to college, getting my degrees and all of that. And so I would have never known that I was going to start a drone company back then, even when I was going through college, but I knew it was so important to learn as much as I could. Um, every little bit of knowledge, whether it's about technology and you know a little bit about the software, or you take some classes and you learn managerial accounting, or economics, or different things that will help you, right? Knowing how to read your own books as an entrepreneur is critical. Knowing how to read people is critical. To know when your gut's telling you something's off and you got to dive deeper. If you ever meet any Green Berets, they're great people, and a lot of the times they're kind of the thinking man special operator, right? Because they go in a very small team and try and destabilize uh, regions and work with local forces and become those force multipliers, and so a lot of it is just implementing known technology, known knowledge, best ways of doing things, and all of that is just learning and research, right? And so you ever meet a Green Beret, they're brilliant people, um, but that's why, right? You need to have all of that ammo to be able to do your job. And if you go into a fight, right, if you start a drone company and you're going into a fight, there are other people starting companies with the same exact idea, and who's got more knowledge, who did more of that preparation, who put more of the pain out in the training is going to determine who puts less pain out in the war, right? And so as much as you can learn, you can never learn too much, and you can never be too multidisciplinary. That's most important. Learning things in so many different areas, you'll eventually find they overlap in a lot of different ways, and what you learn in music might help you in math. And so uh, don't overly specialize either, would be my advice.
Mhm. So yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Walsh, for coming on my podcast. I had a great time talking to you, and you answered like a lot of my questions. And I'll just spend a couple days editing this podcast and this episode, and then it'll be out on the channel very soon. So
Can't wait.
yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Really appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.